There are moments in life when the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. When you stop trying to fill every space with sound, with words, with movement, something begins to shift beneath the surface. Silence is often misunderstood. Many fear it, believing it means disconnection or weakness. But in truth, silence is the womb of understanding. It is where clarity is born, where emotions have room to breathe, and where realization quietly unfolds without effort. When two people are caught in the rhythm of constant communication, they often lose the ability to hear what exists beyond the words. The noise of opinions, explanations, and justifications become so loud that truth cannot be felt. But the moment silence enters, awareness begins to rise. What is real starts to surface, not because it was created in that moment, but because silence finally gave it space to be seen. Silence does not demand. It does not argue. It does not persuade. It simply allows. It allows the other person to meet themselves in the absence of your voice. It gives them room to think, to feel, to remember. In that quiet distance, reflection begins to happen naturally. The human mind often resists reflection when it is constantly occupied by noise. But when sound fades, realization finds its opening. What once felt obvious becomes meaningful. What once felt insignificant begins to matter. In relationships, silence is often seen as a punishment. People assume that silence means anger, indifference, or rejection. But silence used with awareness is something entirely different. It is not withdrawal, it is space. It is saying, without words, I am here, but I am not going to force understanding. It is giving the other person time to feel the consequence of your absence, not as a threat, but as a mirror. Because realization cannot be taught through words, it must be felt. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop protecting someone from their own awareness, you allow them to meet the truth that has always been waiting behind your words. Sometimes when you speak too much, you dilute your essence. You hand out pieces of your energy trying to make others see what they are not yet ready to see. Silence gathers those pieces back to you. It draws your energy inward, where it strengthens rather than scatters. In the stillness of silence, both people begin to see themselves more clearly. The one who stays silent learns patience, learns trust, learns surrender. The one who receives that silence begins to feel what once went unnoticed. Every habit, every gesture, every moment that was once taken for granted suddenly becomes vivid. This is the space where realization grows, in the gap between what was and what is. Silence has a language of its own. It speaks in sensations rather than sentences. It whispers through intuition rather than explanation. It makes people listen, not with their ears, but with their hearts. In the absence of sound, perception deepens. You begin to notice subtle things, the way your body reacts, the way your thoughts quiet, the way your breathing slows. You begin to notice how energy moves differently when words are not trying to control it. That awareness is realization taking form. There is a discipline in silence that few understand. It requires restraint not to speak when your emotions are loud. It requires strength not to rush into clarification or comfort. But the beauty of silence is that it teaches through experience, not through control. You realize that not everything needs to be said. That truth, in its own time, will reveal itself without your interference. You learn to trust the natural intelligence of space. When you are silent, you give others the freedom to realize their own patterns. You no longer stand in the way of their lessons. Many people need to lose your voice to appreciate its depth. They need to feel your absence to recognize its value. They need to walk in quiet spaces to understand what your presence once gave them. This is not punishment, it is growth. Because realization is not born in comfort, it is born in the awareness that something meaningful is no longer there. The mind resists silence because silence exposes truth. When everything is quiet, you can no longer hide behind noise. You feel the emotions you have ignored. You see the intentions you once disguised. You hear the inner voice that has been waiting patiently to guide you. And so silence becomes not a void, but a teacher. It teaches through presence, through stillness, through the slow unfolding of awareness that words could never deliver. In silence, you also realize how little control you truly need. The ego wants to explain, to justify, to be understood. But the soul simply wants to be at peace. And peace does not speak, it radiates. The more you learn to rest in silence, the more powerful your presence becomes. You begin to notice that understanding flows more easily when you stop forcing it. The clarity you once tried to create through dialogue now arrives effortlessly through stillness. Realization happens in the pauses, in the spaces between thoughts, in the gaps between interactions, in the quiet after a storm of emotion. It is in those empty spaces that wisdom is born, because silence allows energy to settle. It allows the noise of reaction to fade so that reflection can finally emerge. Silence is not the opposite of communication, it is the depth of it. It communicates that you are grounded enough to wait, that you are wise enough to listen, and that you are peaceful enough to trust the timing of truth. When you step into silence, you are no longer seeking validation. You are seeking understanding. You are not chasing connection. You are allowing it to mature naturally. And so the realization that grows in silence is not forced. It blossoms gently, like dawn breaking after a long night. It comes when the noise subsides, when the effort ends, when presence replaces performance. That is why silence is powerful, because in its stillness, everything false begins to dissolve and everything true begins to emerge. There is a subtle, invisible force that connects every interaction between two people, energy. It flows through words, through gestures, through presence. It can be warm, grounding, and full of life, or it can be restless, demanding, and heavy. Most people do not realize how much energy they give away until they decide to withdraw it. Only then do they see how powerful their presence truly was. Energy withdrawn becomes energy felt because absence has a vibration of its own. It is not emptiness, it is awareness amplified. When you are constantly giving, constantly reaching, constantly offering your energy to someone, it becomes easy for that energy to be taken for granted. It blends into the background, unnoticed like air, always there, always available. But the moment you pull that energy back, the silence left behind becomes almost deafening. The same person who once overlooked your presence begins to feel the sudden void. It is in this absence that realization awakens. What they once received freely now feels precious. Because its source has gone still, energy cannot disappear, it only changes form. When you withdraw it from others, it does not vanish, it returns to you. It begins to gather, to strengthen, to cleanse the fragments of yourself that were scattered in too many directions. The energy that was once moving outward starts flowing inward, nourishing your spirit, rebuilding your center. You feel your awareness sharpen, your emotions stabilize, your peace return. The more you reclaim this energy, the more magnetic your presence becomes, not because you chase attention, but because you no longer leak it. The human heart is naturally drawn to what is no longer available. When your energy is everywhere, people feel it, but they don't value it. When it retreats, they begin to sense its weight. This is the paradox of presence. The less you give freely, the more deeply it is felt. A person who has grown used to your constant warmth begins to feel the cold once that warmth is gone. They begin to wonder why things feel different, why the connection no longer flows, why they suddenly feel empty in the spaces where you once existed. That is not punishment, that is awareness awakening through contrast. When energy is withdrawn consciously, it is not an act of rejection, it is an act of restoration. It means you have chosen to stop feeding what drains you and to start nurturing what sustains you. You begin to realize that every message, every effort, every explanation carries a vibration. And when you keep giving that vibration to someone who does not receive it with presence, your energy begins to dim. Withdrawal, then, becomes an act of alignment. A return to balance, where giving and receiving are no longer unequal. There is a stillness that comes when you stop pouring yourself into places that do not reflect you. At first, it may feel empty, like something is missing. But soon, that emptiness transforms into spaciousness. You begin to notice how much lighter your mind feels when it is not entangled in someone else's emotional field. You begin to sense how powerful your silence can be when it is grounded in awareness rather than reaction. This is the moment when your energy stops being scattered and starts being concentrated. People often chase what they can feel but cannot fully understand. When your energy retreats, it creates a mystery, a quiet presence that pulls others in, not through effort but through vibration. They begin to feel your absence not as distance, but as presence unspoken. The air around your name changes. They sense your energy differently, stronger, cleaner, more centered. This is how withdrawal transforms into attraction. By removing your energy from the external world, you amplify its impact. When you were constantly available, your energy was like sunlight on a bright day, comforting but unnoticed. When you step back, it becomes like moonlight, rare, soft, reflective, and magnetic. People are drawn to it because it feels different. It carries calmness, not chaos. It carries depth, not demand. Energy that is reclaimed begins to shine in a quieter way, not loud but profound, and those who once overlooked it begin to feel its weight in their silence, their thoughts, their longing. To withdraw your energy is not to close your heart. It is to open it in the right direction. It means choosing not to give what is sacred to what does not see its value. It means trusting that your energy carries a frequency, one that deserves to be received with awareness, not carelessness. Every time you pull your attention back, you are teaching others how to treat your presence. You are reminding them that your energy is not endless, that your light is not automatic, that your peace is not a resource to be consumed. The human body is deeply sensitive to energetic change. You can feel when someone's energy no longer reaches for you, even if no words are spoken. You can sense the shift, the stillness where there was once motion. That stillness speaks louder than any message. It says, I have returned to myself. It says, I have remembered where my energy belongs. This silent declaration carries more strength than any confrontation could ever hold. When energy is withdrawn, awareness heightens on both sides. You begin to notice how you once overextended yourself to be understood or appreciated. You begin to see how much of your emotional landscape was shaped around someone else's response. And they too begin to notice, not immediately, but gradually, how much your energy influenced their peace. The comfort they once felt from your presence begins to fade, replaced by curiosity, by wondering, by missing. That is when energy withdrawn becomes energy felt. There is an unseen law that governs energy. What is not valued must return to its source. It cannot stay where it is not respected. When you stop giving, you are not taking anything away. You are simply allowing the balance of nature to restore itself. The same way a tide pulls back to gather strength before returning, your energy withdraws to renew itself. And when it comes back, it carries more clarity, more depth, more quiet confidence than before. To withdraw your energy is to acknowledge your worth. It is to understand that presence is not about being everywhere, it is about being intentional. The world begins to respond differently when your energy no longer chases, when it no longer proves, when it simply exists in stillness. The space you leave behind becomes the space where others start to feel what they had forgotten to appreciate. That is the moment realization begins, when absence becomes a teacher and your silence becomes a presence that can be felt even from afar. There is a moment between stimulus and response. A space so small that most people miss it, yet within it lies the power to shape the outcome of everything that follows. That space is stillness. It is not the absence of feeling, but the master of it. When life provokes you, when emotions rise, when someone texts your peace, the ordinary mind reacts instantly. It wants to defend, to prove, to strike back. But the wise understand that true strength is not found in reaction. It is found in stillness. Stillness speaks louder than reaction because it carries the energy of awareness rather than the noise of impulse. Reaction is fast, impulsive, and emotional. Stillness is slow, conscious, and deliberate. Reaction is driven by the ego, the part of you that fears losing control, losing face, losing validation. Stillness, however, comes from the deeper self, the one that does not need to prove anything. When you are still, you become like calm water, reflective, clear, and powerful in silence. You see everything as it is, without distortion. You begin to understand that you do not need to match chaos with chaos or fire with fire. You only need to hold your ground and allow truth to reveal itself through time. When you react, you speak from pain. When you remain still, you speak from power. The difference between the two is vast, though it may appear subtle from the outside. Reaction releases energy outward, stillness gathers it inward. One scatters your peace, the other deepens it. In stillness, there is dignity, there is presence, there is awareness of what truly matters and what does not deserve your attention. The mind wants to speak, but the heart whispers, wait. And in that waiting, wisdom is born. People who live unconsciously are constantly reacting to others, to situations, to emotions that arise within them. Their peace is fragile, depending entirely on external conditions. The smallest disturbance can shake their balance because they have not yet learned the language of stillness. But once you begin to cultivate it, you realize that stillness is not weakness. It is the highest form of intelligence, the ability to observe without losing yourself. Stillness allows you to see beyond the surface. It gives you the clarity to sense the true intention behind words and actions. When someone provokes you, it is not always about you. It is about their own unresolved energy seeking an outlet. If you react, you feed that energy. If you remain still, you reflect it back to them. The still person becomes a mirror, showing others their own noise, their own imbalance without judgment. In this way, stillness becomes a teacher, not only for you but for those around you. In relationships, stillness carries an unspoken power. When arguments arise, when emotions flare, silence often says more than words ever could. It communicates calmness, self-control, and depth. It creates space for reflection, not just for you, but for the other person as well. In that space, truth often emerges naturally. Words spoken in reaction are like sparks in dry grass. They ignite quickly and burn out fast, leaving only damage behind. But silence, when rooted in stillness, is like water, cooling, cleansing, patient. It does not destroy, it dissolves. To remain still when everything inside you wants to react is not easy. It requires awareness, discipline, and trust. Awareness to see your emotions before they control you. Discipline to pause instead of speaking from pain. Trust that silence will reveal more than reaction ever could. This practice is not about suppressing emotion. It is about transforming it. You learn to sit with your discomfort, to breathe through your tension, to listen beneath the noise. You realize that what feels urgent in the moment rarely matters in the long run. Stillness changes how energy moves through you. When you react, energy rushes out of your body, through words, through anger, through frustration. You feel drained because you have given your power away. But when you stay still, the energy stays within you. It refines itself, becoming strength, becoming awareness. The same energy that once sought to explode now settles like sediment at the bottom of clear water. You become rooted, grounded, unshakable. And those who once tried to provoke you begin to feel their own disquiet in your calmness. Stillness is not silence alone, it is inner silence. You can appear quiet on the outside yet still be turbulent within. True stillness is when your inner world is not reacting either. It is when your thoughts slow, your breath deepens, and you are fully present in the moment, unmoved by external storms. In that state, every action you take carries more weight because it is intentional. You no longer speak to defend, you speak to express truth. You no longer move from fear, you move from clarity. This is the power that reaction can never reach. When you embody stillness, people feel it. They may not understand it, but they sense it. Your calmness unsettles those who rely on chaos to maintain control. Your composure confuses those who expect conflict. Your silence forces others to face themselves. Because stillness does not fight, it reveals. It makes the other person confront their own energy without you saying a single word. This is why stillness speaks louder than reaction, because it communicates on a level beyond language. There is also a quiet beauty in restraint. Not every emotion deserves expression. Not every challenge needs to be met. Sometimes the greatest response is no response, not from avoidance, but from strength. The power to remain still in the face of provocation is the power of a mind that has mastered itself. It is the realization that peace is not found in control of others, but in control of self. Stillness is presence without resistance. It does not argue with what is happening. It simply observes. It does not rush to fix, to justify, to prove. It trusts that time truth and clarity will do their work without force. When you move from this state, your actions are precise. Your words, when finally spoken, carry depth because they are born from reflection, not reactivity. In a world addicted to reaction, stillness becomes your rebellion. It separates you from the noise. It gives you command over your energy, your emotions, your direction. You begin to understand that life is not asking you to win every conflict. It is asking you to master your response to it. You realize that stillness is not passive. It is profoundly active, holding the strength of a mountain and the patience of the sea. It is through stillness that you learn to see, to feel, to understand, and to respond only when the moment truly calls for it. There is a peculiar thing that happens when distance enters a connection, something subtle, invisible, and yet deeply powerful. The human heart begins to feel more, not less. What once felt ordinary becomes sacred. What once went unnoticed begins to echo. Distance, though often feared, has the power to reveal truth. It stretches time and space just enough for awareness to expand. When presence is removed, emotions no longer hide behind familiarity. They begin to speak in echoes that grow louder the farther you drift. When two people are close, both physically and emotionally, they become accustomed to each other's energy. The mind begins to normalize the presence that once felt special. The voice, the laugh, the small gestures, they blend into routine. But when distance arrives, that routine breaks. Silence fills the space where sound once lived, and memory starts to take its place. Every moment that once passed unnoticed begins to replay, magnified by absence. This is what distance does. It takes the ordinary and transforms it into something extraordinary by removing immediate access to it. Emotional echoes are the reminders of connection that linger when physical closeness fades. They are the aftertaste of shared energy, the subtle sensations that remain even when the source is no longer near. Distance amplifies these echoes because the human mind becomes more sensitive to what it cannot touch. The heart starts listening more deeply. What was once overlooked is now cherished. A message unanswered, a laugh remembered, a scent caught in memory. These small fragments begin to echo like ripples on still water. People often think distance weakens bonds, but in truth, it tests their depth. Surface level attachments fade when space is created, but genuine emotional connections begin to pulse more strongly. The energy that once moved between two people face to face now travels invisibly like sound traveling through vast open air. It doesn't disappear, it reverberates. Sometimes softly, sometimes with intensity. And the more time passes, the more distinct those echoes become. Distance creates contrast. It separates noise from meaning. When someone is constantly near, emotions are mixed with distractions, the daily routines, the small disagreements, the passing moods. But when space is introduced, all the surface static fades, leaving only the essence. The emotion that remains is the truth. If there was real care, it will grow louder in distance. If there was only attachment or habit, it will fade into silence. Distance has no agenda, it simply amplifies what was already there. There is something profoundly revealing about the way distance transforms memory. When presence is constant, we rarely pause to reflect, but when absence arrives, reflection becomes unavoidable. The mind replays old words, gestures, and moments, trying to decode their meaning. What was once background noise now becomes a message. You begin to feel more through what is gone than you ever did when it was here. This is the echo of emotion. It does not need proximity to be felt. It only needs awareness. Distance also introduces an element of longing, a gentle ache that is both painful and illuminating. Longing is the sound of an emotional echo vibrating through the emptiness of space. It is not just missing someone's presence, it is recognizing the depth of what their energy brought into your life. That ache is not weakness, it is proof of connection. It shows that something within you was touched deeply enough to continue resonating even in their absence. Distance amplifies this resonance until you begin to understand what that connection truly meant. In stillness and solitude, emotions grow louder because there are fewer distractions to drown them out. The heart listens differently when silence surrounds it. It hears the echoes of laughter, of words once spoken, of moments once shared. It feels the weight of what is no longer within reach. But it also begins to understand something greater. That connection does not end where distance begins. The physical gap may widen, but emotional energy transcends it. The mind often tries to protect itself from these echoes by rationalizing. It says, move on. Forget, it doesn't matter anymore. But the body knows differently. The energy of connection does not dissolve easily. It lingers in the nervous system, in memory, in the way your heart responds when you hear a familiar sound or see something that reminds you of them. Distance, rather than erasing these sensations, amplifies them. It stretches time long enough for realization to seep through, realization of how deeply someone's presence had intertwined with your being. Sometimes, the echo is not about missing another person, but about rediscovering yourself through their absence. When someone leaves your life or when communication fades, the silence they leave behind becomes a mirror. You begin to see what parts of you were dependent on that connection. You notice how much energy you gave, how much attention you offered, how much you relied on their presence for comfort. And slowly, you learn to listen to those echoes not as reminders of loss, but as teachers of awareness. They guide you back to yourself. Distance teaches emotional intelligence in a way that closeness never could. When someone is near, It is easy to confuse reaction with connection. But when space is created, reaction disappears, and what remains is pure feeling. You begin to differentiate between attachment and appreciation, between dependency and depth. The echoes that fill your solitude are not punishments, they are lessons. Each one revealing a truth you couldn't hear when you were surrounded by noise. Time also has a role in this amplification. The longer the distance remains, the more the emotional resonance refines itself. At first, the echo may feel heavy, filled with longing or confusion. But as days turn into weeks and weeks into months, that echo softens. It becomes understanding, it becomes gratitude. Distance transforms raw emotion into mature awareness. What once hurt becomes wisdom. What once acts becomes clarity. When you look at the nature of sound, you realize that echoes only exist because of distance. Without separation, there is no reverberation. In the same way, emotional echoes exist because hearts need space to truly hear. When two energies are constantly intertwined, they lose perspective. When they are pulled apart, they begin to sense the outline of their bond. They begin to feel the depth of what once seemed simple. Distance does not always mean loss. Sometimes it is a form of purification, burning away illusion, leaving only what is real. It amplifies emotion not to torment you, but to help you see what was true and what was temporary. It sharpens your senses to the subtleties of energy. It teaches that love, care, and connection are not confined by physical proximity. They exist in vibration, in memory, in resonance. The echoes that arise from distance are not ghosts of what was lost. They are reminders of what was alive. They remind you that presence leaves an imprint, that energy once exchanged continues to move, that absence can awaken awareness in ways closeness never could. Distance stretches the heart, allowing it to hold more understanding, more appreciation, more compassion. It teaches that the more space there is between two souls, the louder the truth of their connection becomes, not through words, not through presence, but through the quiet, endless reverberation of feeling that never fully fades. There is a kind of strength that does not announce itself, that does not demand to be seen or heard. It does not raise its voice, nor does it seek recognition. It is quiet, steady, and unshakable. That strength is born in silence. Silence is not simply the absence of words. It is the presence of awareness. It is the space between impulse and wisdom, between chaos and clarity. When you no longer need to explain yourself, to prove your worth, or to fight for validation, that is when silence begins to reveal the depth of your inner power. In a world that glorifies constant noise, silence is an act of rebellion. People have been conditioned to fill every pause with words, to respond to every challenge, to express every thought. But true strength lies in restraint. The ability to hold your peace when everything around you demands reaction is not weakness. It is mastery. It is a declaration that your center cannot be disturbed by external noise. Silence does not mean submission. It means you have chosen not to waste your energy where it will not be understood. Inner strength is not always visible to the eyes of others. It lives in the stillness of your being, in your ability to stay grounded when the world around you trembles. It is found in the way you breathe through discomfort, in the way you remain calm when provoked, in the way you trust time to reveal what truth cannot yet express. Silence gives strength its shape. It gives it the form of patience, dignity, and composure. When you remain silent in moments of conflict, you are not avoiding truth, you are protecting your peace. Words spoken in anger carry the vibration of instability. They scatter energy, create distortion, and often deepen misunderstanding. But when you choose silence, you allow truth to emerge naturally. You create a space where awareness can rise without resistance. This is the essence of inner strength. To trust that everything does not need to be said, and that some things are better understood through quiet reflection than through loud reaction. There is also wisdom in knowing when silence speaks more powerfully than words ever could. A person who has mastered silence no longer needs to argue because they understand that energy communicates far beyond language. Their presence alone becomes an answer. The calmness in their eyes, the steadiness in their breath, the peace in their posture. All of it conveys what words cannot. Silence reveals strength because it cannot be faked. Words can disguise weakness. Silence exposes truth. Silence teaches endurance. It teaches you to hold your composure while time works on your behalf. When life tests you, silence becomes your shelter. You learn that not every situation requires a response, not every judgment deserves defense. The strongest people are often the quietest, not because they have nothing to say, but because they have learned that energy is sacred. They refuse to spend it on noise. They understand that inner peace is more valuable than external validation. In silence, you meet yourself. Without the distraction of constant communication, you begin to hear the sound of your own spirit. You begin to understand what truly matters, what truly hurts, and what truly heals. You realize that silence is not empty. It is full of answers that cannot be heard through chaos. When you stop speaking, the mind settles. When the mind settles, the heart begins to guide. And when the heart leads, you find the kind of strength that cannot be shaken by circumstance. To be silent in the face of misunderstanding requires courage. It requires trust in your own truth. It is easy to react, to defend, to shout over the noise of others. But to remain silent, to let your integrity speak for itself, that is strength. Silence is not passive, it is active self-control. It is the discipline of the spirit that refuses to be dragged into lower energies. You become an observer rather than a participant in chaos. You conserve your power rather than spilling it into battles that do not deserve your light. The energy of silence is magnetic. When you stop reacting, people begin to feel the depth of your presence. They sense something different, something calm, unwavering, untouchable. Your silence makes others reflect on their own noise. It forces them to confront their own lack of balance. That is why silence is often misunderstood. It makes people uncomfortable because it reveals what they cannot control. Yet that discomfort is precisely what awakens realization. Through silence, you learn to transform pain into wisdom. When you stop trying to escape your emotions through words or actions, you begin to sit with them. You listen to what they are teaching you. Every emotion carries a message, but that message can only be heard in quiet. Silence gives you the space to process without panic, to understand without judgment. You learn that strength is not the absence of emotion, but the ability to feel without being consumed. There is a profound dignity that comes with silence. It is the dignity of someone who knows their worth, who no longer begs to be understood or accepted. The more you embody silence, the less you need validation. You realize that people's opinions do not define your reality. Their noise no longer has power over your inner peace. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, live differently. Not because the world has changed, but because your relationship with it has. Silence reveals strength because it shows mastery over self. It shows that you no longer seek control over others, you seek harmony within. You realize that strength is not about dominance or expression, but about balance. The balance between knowing when to act and when to remain still, when to speak and when to simply observe. In this balance, silence becomes your greatest ally. The longer you practice silence, the more attuned you become to subtle energies. You start to sense the truth behind people's words, the emotion behind their tone, the intention behind their actions. This quiet perception becomes your power. You no longer need explanations because your intuition speaks louder than logic. Silence sharpens awareness. It heightens understanding. It brings you closer to the essence of things. Even in moments of loss or heartbreak, silence holds you. It teaches you that healing does not come from talking endlessly about pain, but from sitting with it until it transforms. In the depths of silence, the soul finds renewal. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What once caused chaos becomes clarity. Silence has a way of bringing everything back to its natural rhythm. In this way, silence is not merely an absence. It is a presence so full, so complete, that it needs no words to prove its power. It reveals who you truly are beneath the noise of emotion, beneath the opinions of others, beneath the stories the mind creates. It shows you that the truest strength is not loud, not reactive, not desperate to be seen. It is quiet, patient, unmovable, like a mountain untouched by the storm, like the ocean that remains deep no matter how high the waves above it rise. Desire is not something that can be forced, demanded, or constantly fed with words and attention. True desire breathes in absence, in the stillness that exists when two souls step back from constant exchange. When everything becomes quiet, when the voice falls silent, something subtle begins to awaken. Silence, often feared as emptiness, is where longing is reborn. It is where the energy of connection regains its purity, where emotion transforms from habit into genuine feeling. When you are silent, the noise that once filled the space between you begins to fade. The mind that once sought reassurance begins to search deeper. The one who was used to your words, your presence, your attention, suddenly finds themselves listening to the quiet you have left behind. It is in that quiet that realization begins to grow. Desire does not die when you stop speaking, it expands. It stretches into the spaces once filled with your voice. The absence of sound becomes an invitation, an unspoken question that the heart cannot ignore. Silence becomes a mirror in which both people see themselves more clearly. When there are no words, there are no distractions. The person who once took your presence for granted begins to feel its absence not as punishment, but as gravity. The silence you leave behind becomes magnetic. It pulls at memory, emotion, and imagination all at once. They begin to replay moments, to analyze expressions, to revisit emotions they once brushed aside. Silence turns ordinary presence into something sacred. It turns what was familiar into something rare. Desire cannot survive in saturation. When something is constantly present, it loses its value in the eyes of the one who receives it. This is human nature, to overlook what feels abundant. Silence interrupts that cycle. It creates distance, and in that distance, appreciation is reborn. The energy of missing, the ache of absence becomes the soil in which desire grows again. In silence, longing is refined. It becomes cleaner, more honest, less about ego and more about essence. Silence also restores polarity. In every relationship, there is a rhythm, the dance of giving and receiving, speaking and listening, approaching and withdrawing. When that rhythm is lost, connection becomes static. Too much talking, too much availability, too much explaining, it weakens attraction. But silence restores mystery. It reawakens curiosity. It reminds the other person that there is still more to learn about you, that your silence is not emptiness but depth. Desire thrives on that depth. It seeks what it cannot fully understand. In silence, energy shifts. Words scatter energy outward, but silence pulls it inward. It gathers power, consolidates emotion, and becomes presence. When you withhold your words, your energy becomes concentrated. You begin to feel your own essence again, the weight of your being, the fullness of your own emotional current. Others sense this even from afar. Silence changes your vibration. It makes your presence felt without your needing to appear. It is not withdrawal in weakness, but return to self. And in that return, you become magnetic. Desire is not always about pursuit, it is about recognition. The one who once reached for you may have done so out of habit, out of comfort. But when silence enters, they must confront the question, why do I miss this person? The silence forces reflection. It reveals which connections were shallow and which were real. In that realization, desire transforms, no longer about possession, but about presence. Silence makes them feel not only your absence, but their own emptiness without your energy. When you stop speaking, your energy speaks. The unspoken becomes louder than words. The pauses between messages, the quiet between interactions, they carry meaning. They carry the energy of mystery, respect, and restraint. The person who feels your silence begins to project meaning onto it. They wonder what you are thinking, how you are feeling, whether you have moved on, or whether you have found peace. This uncertainty fuels curiosity, and curiosity fuels desire. Silence has the power to reignite attraction precisely because it removes pressure. When there is no constant effort to connect, both sides return to their natural state. The heart begins to breathe again. Desire, which was once smothered by overexposure, begins to stir in the quiet. It is like a flame rekindling after being starved of oxygen. Too much attention suffocates, silence gives space. That space is not coldness, it is nourishment for longing. In the quiet, the imagination awakens. The mind begins to fill the silence with emotion, memory, and fantasy. The absence of words becomes an open canvas, and the other person begins to paint it with their own longing. This is why silence is so powerful. It lets them participate in their own realization. They do not feel pushed or manipulated, they feel drawn. They begin to chase not you, but the feeling they once had when you were near. Silence makes them remember not what you said, but how you made them feel. True desire does not need to be maintained through performance. It needs to be rediscovered through presence. Silence helps both you and the other person reconnect to the truth of your connection. It strips away the noise, the expectations, the assumptions. What remains is pure energy. Either it grows in your absence or it dissolves. Either way, silence reveals truth, and where truth exists, real desire is reborn. There is a sacred quality to the energy of silence. It is the same stillness that exists in nature before a storm, the same pause between a heartbeat and the next. It carries tension, but also potential. When you hold silence, you are not withholding love. You are allowing it to breathe. You are giving the other person room to feel what they have lost sight of. Silence becomes a space where the energy of connection regenerates. It takes courage to let silence do its work. Most people rush to fill it because they fear being forgotten. But the paradox is that silence, when held from strength, makes you unforgettable. It is not the words that linger, it is the energy behind your quiet. When you stop reaching out, you stop feeding the illusion of control. You let energy move naturally, and what is real finds its way back. Silence transforms desire from something reactive into something conscious. It becomes no longer about needing, but about appreciating. The one who feels your silence learns to see your value through contrast, to understand that your presence is not guaranteed, that your energy is not endless. And in that realization, they begin to crave it not out of possession, but out of reverence. In silence, you reclaim your power. You return to your own emotional center. You let the world come to you rather than chasing after it. And in doing so, you remind both yourself and the other that desire is not born from noise, from words, or from constant validation. It is born from space, from stillness, from the quiet, knowing that what is meant to feel will find its way back through the silence.